This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Loki, Episode 2, The Variant.
I'm 10 steps ahead of you. I've been playing a game of my own all along.
What? Charm your way in front of the timekeepers, hustle them, and seize control of the TVA? Am I getting warm? A double cross by history's most reliable liar.
Okay, why are you in there sticking your neck out for me?
I'll give you two options, and you can believe whichever one you want. A, because I see a scared little boy shivering in the cold, and you kind of feel bad for that ice runt. Or B, I just want to catch this guy, and I'll tell you whatever I need to tell you.
I don't need your sympathy.
Good, because I'm running out of it.
Hey nonny, fellow Defenders, and welcome back to the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries. Yes, we are here talking about Loki, Episode 2, The Variant. I am one of your jet skiing hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek.
And rounding out this trio of variants, I am Chris.
I have to know why Hey Nonny, John.
Because they went back to a medieval fair in 1985 in Wisconsin.
Good. Very good. Yes, we will obviously be talking spoiler-filled about this episode of Loki. But yes, just quickly, that opening scene. Anybody else massively surprised when 1985 came up on screen? Because that looks like a pretty good Renaissance fair, doesn't it?
We just don't get them over here.
We don't.
Or in the UK. Like America goes, oh, I need to go to Ren Fair. Like, so many people talk about it. I'm like, you've got the LARPing element and you've got the rest. I'm just like, I want to do it. Over here, you've got a couple of people in cosplay, and then it's just usually in a convention centre, if you're lucky. It's the local sports hall.
Yeah, or it's people in real life doing things like Morris dancing or
Yes.
maypole dancing or any kind of things like that. I mean, you kind of have reenactment stuff, of battles, I guess.
Yeah,
but that's not really where you drink kind of beer and eat cheese. It's where you get your face, figuratively shot off in the reenactment.
Yes,
with
not literally, because that's not really a reenactment. That's an actual battle, if that happens. Enough about Renaissance fairs. Let's get into the podcast overall. Quickly, before we go into it, I just want to say that we did have an appearance this week on another podcast. All three of us got together and had a chat with the guys over at Superhero Show. Had a conversation about TV Podcast Industries, what we do, the shows we've loved to cover, the shows that we may not necessarily have loved covering. And it was a really good chat. Go over and check out the Superhero Show. Our bits right at the end of their episode. This week's episode for Superhero Show is massive. If you haven't heard them before, what they do is cover every single comic book related show every week.
Wow.
And nowadays, that's around 15 to 20 shows. Some of them they don't cover in any depth at all, because they may not have watched the episodes, but they do discuss every single show that's on every week. So we are towards the end of the episode. So if you want to check that out, go over to Superhero Show and have a listen.
Dare I say, it's not scientifically possible, Mulder.
It's not possible unless you have about 5 or 6 hours available to you every week, which we don't either. So we have to choose the shows that we cover. But it was good fun, talking to Mike, from the Superhero Show, wasn't it, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, very
really
much so. And just remember to tell them TV Podcast Industry sent you.
Exactly. One other big announcement for the week. It is June, which means it's Chris Jones's birthday. This week, happy birthday, Mr. Chris Jones.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday, Christoph.
Yes, I am a spry 55 years old.
You don't even sound it or look at Chris, which is impressive.
No, I appreciate it. It's all the timey-wimey jumping. I am actually a variant of my own variant self.
Exactly. You look about 49 or something. Not 50.
Thank you so much. It really is.
The
It's the youthful good looks and the lack of grey in my hair.
Absolutely. Well, we must look 70 then, since we're both
speak
quite
for
grey.
yourself.
Well, no,
I'm as smooth as a baby's bottom.
Well, we are all celebrating Chris's birthday, kind of virtually at the moment. We're celebrating on the podcast, but hopefully we'll get to meet up and have a couple of drinks with Chris to
Don't
celebrate
worry.
as well.
Yes, don't worry, Chris. We'll eat your birthday cake.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Appreciate that.
I did do that for my my niece's 18th birthday. As you remember, John.
We did.
I cooked a 2-tier chocolate birthday cake and ate it all between myself
In front
and John.
of
In front of her on the Zoom call, exactly.
Yeah. Well, she had to know that I cooked it.
It was
that's
gorgeous.
So.
Or did he? Did you?
I did cook it, absolutely. We might do the
Or
same for you,
didn't
Chris,
he?
if we're in the mood for eating a massive birthday cake this weekend.
I am very much down. I'm down for that.
Excellent. Well,
I do like a good old nibble.
Well, have a very happy birthday, Chris.
Thank you very much, gents.
But with the celebratory birthday wishes for Chris over with, remember, fellow defenders, this is our spoiler-filled discussion of episode 2 of Loki. Mm-hmm. Remember, if you aren't subscribed, please head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com where you can subscribe to any magical or mischievous podcast catcher of your choice. You can support us through Patreon in regular amounts, or for a one-off amount, we are over on buymeacoffee.com/TVPI.
Absolutely.
But all support is absolutely great to get. And of course, you can share the podcast with friends, family, and I think Chris once said grannies, to spread the love, spread the podcast, and share our dulcet tones around the world.
Absolutely. Always good to share it with everybody. I think Loki's a show that everybody will enjoy watching, I think, as well. So,
definitely.
Yeah. If you have any thoughts on the show, or if you want to send Chris any happy birthday messages, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or pop on over and join us on the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries and tag Chris and say happy birthday to him.
Thanks. Any wishes? You can say happy birthday. You can say whatever you would like.
Good
Just
tomorrow,
keep it PC.
Happy Halloween, whatever you
Happy
like.
Halloween. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's very early for that, but why not?
Yeah, sure. It's June. It's fine. Ooh, again, timey-wimey. It is October somewhere, somewhen.
Well, exactly. How very, very Albert Einstein of you, Chris.
Thank you.
Looking at us through Zoom with those big nerdy specs on. Great stuff. But let's get into some nerdy episode details. Derek, on with the show.
Absolutely, yep. The head writer, again, for the series is Michael Waldron. This episode particularly was written by Elissa Karasik. Elissa worked as an assistant to the executive producers on one of your favourite shows, Chris. She worked for a very long time over on Bones.
Oh, it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
You know when you just have, there's a type of show that just, after a while, it's not good, but it's still good. And
Yeah.
you really enjoy it. It's one of those shows.
I really do.
Yeah. It's like Castle. It was just after a certain point, you're like, oh, come on, just keep going, but kill it at the same time.
And that is literally the show that I always get it confused with. I can
Yes.
never tell the difference between Bones and Castle, apart from the cast, of course.
Kind of helps.
But Elissa, obviously, in the writer's room for this series and working on this entire show of Loki. All episodes for the series, confirmed to be directed by Kate Herron now, that the show is out. We had a question about that last week. Kate is confirmed as the director of all of the episodes of this series. If you want to hear a really good interview with Kate about the process and how she got involved with Loki, go over to the Empire podcast. There's a really good interview, probably about 10 or 15 minutes, just of her talking about how she got the job, how she got involved in the show. She sounds so excited and seems to be so interested in the reaction of how everybody will see her show. What's quite interesting about it is she's still editing episodes 5 and 6 of Loki as of last week. So the show is not finalized as we record. I think it's officially finalized now. She's just arrived back in the UK after finishing that process. So the show is officially finalized now, but as of last week and when she was recording the podcast, she was still editing. So there you go.
Excellent stuff. Like us all flying by the seat of her pants.
It does sound like my kind of editing.
Yeah.
John.
It's it's due out tomorrow. Better finish.
Exactly. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for this episode of Loki, episode 2, The Variant?
Sure. A team of Time Variance Authority Minutemen arrive at a Renaissance fair in Wisconsin in 1985. They're on the trail of a Loki variant, but to the tune of holding out for a hero, they are taken out by the hooded figure, who captures and kidnaps Hunter C-20. Meanwhile, back at the TVA headquarters, Mobius meets with Judge Renslayer to explain that Loki is a valuable asset that is needed to catch the murderous variant. Given one last chance, Loki is tasked with searching through the variant's history to find clues on where it might be. Loki suggests that his variant could be hiding in apocalyptic events throughout the sacred timeline, which would mask any activities, since that timeline will end. To test the theory, Mobius takes Loki to Pompeii, 79 AD. With the impending eruption of Mount Vesuvius, they learn that nothing Loki does shows up as a variant timeline. Using the origin data of the Kabloe candy left behind in France at the variant's previous attack, Loki quickly identifies where they could be hiding. When the team arrives at the Roxcart Superstore in 2050's Alabama, Loki meets his variant, where they possess Hunter B-15 and other customers of the store to inform Loki that he has no idea of the scale of their plan. It isn't about him. Finally, revealing their true form to Loki, they set off a chain of time reset charges that are sent throughout time, creating hundreds of breakaway moments and causing chaos in the sacred timeline. As the Time Variance Authority mobilized to do something about the impending multiversal event, Lady Loki slips away from Alabama through a time door, closely followed by Loki, who has escaped his capture.
Wow, from 79 AD all the way up to 2050, this is a huge time-spanning, time-jumping episode of Loki, and I think there's definitely some connections and moments that felt like Doctor Who to me.
It was very Doctor Who-y. Mm-hmm. Really good, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so, and I think it's only going to continue now. Like they slowly introduce the crazy Doctor Who time jumpy levels, and in this they kind of get, okay, last episode we'll introduce you to the understanding and lay the foundations. They'll do 2 or 3 now, and I expect by the end of this series it will be like him jumping through door, right, and we'll be like 100 time streams and time zones in a couple of minutes. Just for, obviously I'm being facetious, but you understand what I mean.
Absolutely. No, it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, definitely some little adventures. I think particularly, the shorter jumps, that they had. Will we kick off into our top 5 variants?
Absolutely. I think we should begin, not at the beginning, but in 1985 for the Renaissance Fair and our variant 1. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, we have this initial arrival at the fair of C20, the agent C20, one of the Minutemen. I have to say, I do like the onlookers who are there, who are all in costume, and they do stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
But they arrive at the fair because of a time event, a Nexus, the start of a Nexus event, where the variant Loki, has come in here. And, I guess this really sets up the idea as well of the variant Loki being able to possess other people.
Absolutely.
It did feel very reminiscent of Wanda's power there in terms of being able to mind control, just with a minty flavor, I guess, with it being green.
Yeah, like remember when we saw that back in Age of Ultron, the first time we really saw Scarlet Witch's power. She's kind of tapping people on the temple. She sends out the kind of red gas to show that she's controlling their mind. Here we kind of see the green gas from Loki, exactly as you say, John. So it does feel like it's really connecting back to, hey, remember everybody, Loki's not just a master manipulator or anything like that. He's also got magic involved. He's very similar to Scarlet Witch.
But there is a slight difference, I think, because at least in Age of Ultron, she's implanting memories or ideas. Here, it's more about control, I guess, but it's very reminiscent, and I think, it was nice to see a bit of this, because ultimately he is a god of mischief and should be able to do some of this. I like the fact as well that when, we have a little bit later where Mobius, it's just before they go through to sort of deal with this timeline event that's happened at this Renaissance Fair in 1985. And Mobius kind of runs through Loki's powers, and we get a really nice little moment Loki, making this distinction between a projection and him replicating himself and all that. So like we know he's got those different powers, but this I think was a new one for me actually, at least from the movies. Yeah.
So our Loki, the Loki we know that throughout time and through the MCU, has not had this power. It's like a charm power. A lot of within the comic books, Enchantress would be the main kind of Asgardian kind of sorcery one who does a lot of the charm. In the MCU, Loki was able to control people using the scepter, which was the Mind Stone. That was how he, to date, had this kind of charm, control powers. So what we're seeing here is that this variant Loki has a different subset of powers. Maybe similar or more expanded. Maybe they are more powerful than the Loki we are aware of. The Loki that we know. But as of right now, they do not have that power.
Right. I'd see in the MCU, I think we probably would always think as the first big introduction is Scarlet Witch to magic. And even at the time, we were kind of thinking she was experimented on. It's not really magic. And then Doctor Strange came in and he's now the magic user. So that was all about explaining what magic is in the MCU. And now when you're trying to kind of line all these characters up together to come into the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I think it's a really good way of doing it to kind of show just this idea of magic a bit more in those characters that are going to be connected together. So I think in the MCU, they were kind of resistant of making Loki being a magic user, in their universe, but certainly in the comics, he has multiple powers that come out in different ways. Well, so I think it was quite a good way to do it in here, just to show the little connection that they're similar in power sets. And it might just be the variant that has that power. It may not be the Loki from 2012 that we're following throughout the show, but I think it was a good little touch to show that.
And of course, one of the variants of Loki in, the potential for multiverse could be Loki Sorcerer Supreme, like from the comics. So totally like Loki, has that magical ability. So, I think this makes sense to me that the variant Loki here would be using this magic, in a way and, using it on C20, who ultimately then she takes control of and kidnaps. So we have that she becomes missing in action once they have, reset the timeline with the reset devices.
Exactly.
Variant Loki takes another one. So whatever, the variant is doing, these, again, it's just being flagged as we see towards the end of the episode, the importance of these devices being taken by the variant.
Exactly.
So just wanted to kind of very quickly call that Sasha Lane, fantastic. Hope we see more of her as C20 because she's in Utopia, which very good comic book based or adjacent, if you want to call it that. Good show. Based in the American version, not the original British version. This is an American remake.
I've only seen the Channel 4 version. I've never seen the American version, unfortunately.
Yeah, the American version, quite good. Yeah. The thing about Loki as a whole is this is very much a magic-based one, but the original timeline for the MCU Disney Plus shows was Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, then WandaVision, and followed pretty quickly by Loki. We got the flip of that to a degree. So you were going to have these two very magic-centric shows being aired very close together.
Yeah.
So they're doing it with the understanding that you probably just come off or just aware of some of the kind of magic elements now that we're aware that magic is a real thing in the MCU.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chris. Yeah, good point to make. But I suppose it's not that far in history with WandaVision. Yes. So, and we know now that everybody who had a Disney Plus subscription was definitely watching WandaVision when it came out. So they're probably a good bet that people know that for Loki.
I think the other good thing about this whole scene in the Renaissance Fair, not only the initial bit where we see the variant, but it's the investigation of what's happened there. Is you see that first interaction of the sacred Loki, I guess, or as he is describing himself in this in this episode as the superior Loki.
Yeah.
Which I really like. I love that his ego is so bad that he has to inflate it with adding the superlative of superior.
Of course,
but we have this nice little interaction in the field between Mobius and Loki where, it looks like he's trying to help. Is he playing for time for him to escape? Is he playing for time because he is a god and he maybe knows something a bit more than he's letting on so far? But, he's using the tail, of the wolf's ears and the wolf's teeth. And, you do get that sense as well that Mobius has, at least some measure of Loki because he's there going, no. He's playing for time here. Set the devices, before it hits the Nexus threshold for it going into chaos. So, there's some really nice interactions throughout this episode between Mobius and Loki.
Yeah, another big shout out to the interaction between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston. I love the two characters together. I love how they're working together. It really works well.
Yeah, but to move on to Variant 2, I guess it's almost his punishment or his detention. It's like he got 100 lines from Mobius because of that little trick that he was trying to play at the Renaissance Fair. Is we come to Loki's mission, where he's having to do a lot of research and delving into the archives of the TVA to find out where the variant may be hiding. Is there something that the TVA has missed? I do think, again, this is really strong where you have Mobius and Loki interacting. The fact that he's kind of been blocked, he's wanting to get archives around the timekeepers or the beginning of time, and you've kind of got the classic deadpan librarian not willing to take any messing from him.
With Loki, this kind of stuff comes really easy for him. Everywhere he's gone and everywhere he's traveled, he tends to be able to get whatever he wants, basically. So this must be so frustrating to Loki, where he just walks up to a librarian who has loads of files available to her, and she says no to him. This idea where he's going, give me the history of the TVA. No. How about the start of time? How about the end of time? No, you're not authorized to any of those things. What are you authorized for? The file marked Loki Laufeyson. That's it. That's the only file you're able to access. And that's how he kind of has to go into this process of a job for Loki. He's effectively working for the first time as well. But I like this idea that he goes through it and comes up with a concept, comes up with a way that this variant of himself could be hiding throughout time.
Yeah. Well, he has got his special TVA uniform now, assigned with, a bit of a running gag from the other Minutemen, and also, I guess, a warning so that they never forget that he is also a variant. I'm
presuming this jacket is going to be worn by a lot of people at Comic-Cons and at Halloween.
I guess so.
For Time Memorial.
I guess so. But Homer once famously said, you don't make friends with salad. By Homer, I do mean Homer Simpson, of course. And except where it is making friends with a salad metaphor, which was just, dare I say it, Chris, to pinch one of your phrases, chef's kiss as well, just to keep the food analogy going.
So I wanted to check this. How does this work? Because this is quite a complicated episode. I think there's a lot of timeline stuff that's going on here, and a lot of real theory that they're getting into. How did this metaphor work? I think Tom Hiddleston, Loki, says it himself. He's like, that I kind of fell apart about halfway through the metaphor, but it's quite important to understand what he's talking about. Basically, if the timeline is this salad bowl, I can do whatever I want to because the entire salad bowl is going to get destroyed in the future. I can do anything in the salad bowl that I want to do because this is going to be destroyed completely in the future. That's the metaphor he's trying to go for. What did you think, Chris? What did you think of how that worked as a metaphor?
I loved it myself. I was going to say it's very easy to understand. It's very easy to understand as you get further into the episode, as they go to Pompeii, as they kind of show it off in the aspect of this event is going to happen. So anything that happens in and around that event no matter what happens is fine, because every living thing that will or potentially remember anything in that period of time will no longer exist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, makes sense. Like, if you think of it like that. Though, pretty sure one or two people escaped Pompeii. Like those goats escaped Pompeii.
But I suppose what he's saying is they don't create branch timelines. That's the test that they have. Like there is a really weird one where he complicates it by saying, I could go to Ragnarok and I could push Hulk off the Rainbow Bridge, which happens, I think, to Hulk. I think Hulk does actually fall off the bridge in Ragnarok, but you're kind of going, but Hulk survives that. Hulk gets away from there. So he'd be able to tell the story of this weird Loki that appeared out of nowhere and pushed me off the side. So that would be a branching timeline. Well, that's what happened. That's what I'm thinking of. So suddenly it started to get more complicated. And then that's when he calls it out and goes, maybe that analogy wasn't the greatest one. But by putting this into the episode, laying it out that way, and then doing the trip to Pompeii as well, putting those two things together, I think you get the idea of what he's trying to say, that it's such a massive event that something so small happening, like another variant of Loki walking in and using it as their base in time, would go unnoticed effectively. So I do like that as the overarching explanation.
Exactly. And I think, that's the whole point. I think when they're trawling through different apocalyptic events, some of them, I think Mobius says everyone has to be wiped out. It's not everyone in the world as such, but like they talk about the Krakatoa event where it's the wipeout of that island. It's the wipeout of, or the extinction of swallows, which has effects on the whole, the whole ecological pyramid. So, it's an interspecies apocalyptic event, I guess, and all of that kind of stuff. So I thought the analogy was really good. And I think what it also did was just, as I say, it's those exchanges between Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, as Loki and Mobius are just so good, because I mean, Owen Wilson's face as he's pouring, he's just chucking tons of salt and pepper onto his salad, which is his lunch, and then finally drowning it in water or some liquid that he's taken from another table, was just really, really good.
That's poor Casey again.
Yeah, it was poor Casey. Yeah. And then just, the way Tom Hiddleston is just, like, he does that open arm gesture. He does it a few times, and he did it at Pompeii. And again, this whole analogy takes them to Pompeii, where again, they have this great sort of moment, where he's speaking Latin, he's releasing the goats, and then he erupts. And I love the fact that he's like, look, aren't I brilliant? As, the theory has been validated by Mobius, and, there's just this pyroclastic sort of cloud of hot ash racing down the volcano, to effectively kill everyone, in the vicinity.
It's the fact that he's in no rush to get out of there as well as
and he's got a big grin on his face.
Yeah, absolutely. Our word of today for geography enthusiast is pyroclastic. Thanks, John.
No worries. We can have a podcast on volcanology, I guess.
I'm very impressed. Anything else on the mission, Chris?
Yeah, just the final piece was, it comes down to this measurement of the variance in the timeline from these events, and that's how no matter what happens, this variance doesn't get big enough because this number doesn't grow because of the apocalypse. So what I'm interested to see is, does that come out again later? Which is there, they're measuring whatever happens in the future. There's this scene where Loki's getting too close to it becoming a branching timeline, and you'll see Mobius with reading the measurement device going, "You're getting too close, man. It's going to be a branching timeline, man." He's like, "No, don't worry. It's fine." Wow. It's that kind of silly play.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know whether it ever gets, it doesn't even start a branching timeline, because once the branching timeline has started, it's begun effectively. So that's the point. This timeline staying absolutely exactly as seen in the sacred timeline, inverted commas,
and we'll get to that.
Yeah. One final thing, just about the discussions that are going on here in the canteen with Mobius and Loki is they have quite a deep conversation really about the nature of things and the purpose of all life, and it's kind of buried in here in all these conversations. Just wanted to have a quick chat about it because I really like this discussion, this idea that Mobius is telling the story of the TVA and how it's created. It's brought about by these 3 aliens effectively who are trying to create the sacred timeline. And right now they're unwinding timelines, to make sure they get to its natural end. And once it ends, that's the end of everything. And we all meet together in this glorious final ending. And Loki goes, do you not realize how weird that sounds? And then I love Mobius throwing that back in Loki's face, going, well, how were you created? It's like, well, a frost giant, and then my adopted father was Odin of Asgard, and it's like, that does sound a bit weird, doesn't it? And I love the conversation. It's quite a deep conversation, because effectively, they're putting it on every religion. Everybody who believes that there is a creation story involved in their religion, or any kind of creation story, really, it all is a bit weird when you think about it. Everything from having the Big Bang creating the universe to having a god that put everybody on Earth. All of it sounds really weird when taken in abstract. So I love that they've had this conversation on the show.
I agree. I think that's what they were trying to call out, not so subtly, in that, whether you believe in a man being pulled by a giant hammer, or you believe in a man being crucified for your sins and rising again, or you believe two particles smashed together and created a whole universe. All of them can be true, none of them can be true. But they all sound weird to everyone who doesn't believe in that other thing.
Yeah.
It's fun, it's a nice poke at belief in general. Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think Loki calls out part of his perspective as well, this idea that that's not really what he cares about. What he cares about is this central concept that he has, which is no one is ever truly bad. No one is ever truly good. Something that he's been painted with quite a lot. He's seen as the bad guy. He is the villain of Marvel's first big movie. So here he's trying to say, I'm a complex person, and I know the people that you treat as heroes aren't necessarily only good, because one of them's his brother, Thor. So he's trying to kind of call that out, that there are complexities. And I think that's just a kind of a meta commentary on some of the older villains, maybe, of the Marvel movies, who really were just villainous, and didn't really have much extra depth to them. They've gotten much better.
Red Skull.
They've gotten much better over the years. Red Skull was basically just Hitler with a red face, Chris. So that was almost realistic in comparison to some of the other villains.
Okay.
But I think it's a kind of a meta comment saying, we know Loki's a villain. He's got his own TV show. It's going to start getting complex from now on. You can't just call him a villain. You're going to have to call him a complex character from now on. So I like that little element to it as well.
Yeah, no, I loved these exchanges as well. Again, I think this is a real strong part of this episode is these two interacting, and it's just really nice because it's still playing on all of Loki's sort of big ups for himself, his ego, whether he can be believed, and Mobius, as I said before, having this kind of measure of him to some extent, which is really nice. And, you have this conversation where they talk about where they're from, but ultimately say, it's all ludicrous. Effectively, it's all chaos, and we all try and put some kind of sense on the chaos. Yeah. And that's what this is. I think it's just really nice. And of course, it all leads as well as part of, this, following their field trip to Vesuvius and to Pompeii. It does lead to, suddenly having another variable, with which to try and track the variant Loki, by the very nature of they now know that they have, apocalypses, that they need to look for apocalypses. Mm-hmm. But in this conversation, you have the kablooey candy or chewing gum from the first episode that was being eaten by the boy in the church in France. Mm-hmm. That this was only manufactured within a certain period.
Yep.
And so that now these dependent variables on the sort of the independent variable that is the Loki variant moving through time and space, to be able to pinpoint them at a certain apocalyptic event at a time where you had kablooey candy. Yeah. So again, it's kind of nice the way they feed off one another. And of course, in this instance, it progresses that the arc of this episode. And again, you have Loki, after being complimented by Mobius, saying, "You are a clever man." And he goes, "Of course," and does his big grin, which is great. Thomas Hiddleston does that so well.
Mm-hmm. He does, really does. Let's get on to Variant 3, our third big point of the episode. One that I want to talk about really was just a little bit about the lives of the TVA employees, because there's kind of references going on. We didn't know anything about this group before the first episode of this season, really. And there's just little kind of drops that are in here. Something about, I think, Owen Wilson eating that salad and having it taken off him. You mentioned his reaction to Loki throwing the salt and pepper on it. Makes me think that he is, that's not a canteen that the food's provided for you. It feels like he's buying his own food in there. Like he feels like he's an absolute standard office worker who's really a pains to lose his salad. He's not getting it for free. He doesn't work for Google or anything, you know. But there's just a couple of little references that I wanted to kind of call out in here. Because Loki mentions it. He says that the TVA's in the future. It looks kind of futuristic, doesn't it? It seems kind of futuristic, and he gets no answer from Mobius at all to it being futuristic. If you think about, you know, the technology is very futuristic to us, of course, but they have aliens involved. So the technology of traveling through time is very futuristic, I suppose. But the technology of the screens that they're using seems like something set in the 50s, seems like something from the Jetsons. It looks kind of like the future maybe, but isn't. Because we know things are vastly different than that now. Every piece of research they're doing is all paper-based. It's all paper files. They're not using computers to search up this stuff. They're going through stacks and stacks of data on paper, not through computers. So there's quite significant things in here that tells you that it may not be in the future. But one of the weirder things that I'm noticing with the characters in the employees of the TVA, it started out last episode with Casey, that processing clerk, having no idea what a fish was, for example. Mobius mentioning his obsession with 1990s jet skis, but never having been on one, because wouldn't it be weird to have a TVA employee on a jet ski? Well, how would anybody know that he's a TVA employee if he goes on a jet ski? He's just a normal human guy, seemingly, right? We have Judge Renslayer, who's saying that she collects all these trinkets, and you see Mobius in the conversation getting really jealous of the fact that she's got all these mementos from all of these different time periods and all the world outside, really, of the TVA. So It seems like all of these people are almost like slaves in this area. Well, maybe not slaves, but people who are born and bred for this job in the TVA, and they've never seen the outside world other than their missions. Anybody else got any weird vibes off the TVA?
Yeah, I mean, you get the whole, Loki, he's been trained up to be this employee. He talks about, the propaganda of the TVA being exhausting. Mm-hmm. That's one side of things, and just how, when Mobius is describing all these things, he says, and even just the, how boring it sounds. And so there's that element.
He says you even make the apocalypse sound boring.
Yeah. So, it is that kind of outsider being able to look into what's happening within the TVA. They've all got their kind of their functions and their cubicle to sit in. I mean, it is very kind of that idea of the great bureaucracy, which is, it really fits that. And so, yes, that idea of something not being quite right with, the TVA employees. I mean, we have the whole thing about whether it's only Loki and Mobius that actually have the free will, in the whole of the TVA. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned it last week about the idea of, the free will around sort of confidence intervals. How far do they extend until the timekeepers go, it's a variant, it's a deviation from the sacred timeline. So, it's all these things are suggestive, now that they've built on them again in episode 2, I think there's more to come from the TVA to find out, its role, and I guess the timekeepers, because both Loki and the Loki variant have the timekeepers in their sights by the looks of it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to recuse myself based on comic book knowledge in terms of I think I know some things. I know what you're asking in the comic books, based on the comic books. So it may be completely different, but I don't want to say something that may ruin a big, nice reveal for everyone in the future.
Absolutely.
So I'll recuse myself from that. One thing, in terms of the aesthetic and the time, it very much reminds me of so there's a series of games called Fallout, by Bethesda Game Studios. So it's that kind of kitschy 50s future. Yeah. So it's kind of Jetsons.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's retro sci-fi.
It is in the future,
vibe.
but at the same, it's retro futuristic. Yeah. It's that kind of very kish kind of look and feel. So they're still on paper, but they use computer screens, and they've got Miss Time came out of the computer and was a hologram, and then jumped back into the computer. So it's very cool. My assumption is Miss Minutes, excuse me. Yeah. Miss Minutes jumped out of time and jumps out of the computer back in. So I get the feeling it's a bit like Asgard. It looks high-tech, futuristic technology, but it's designed to look a different way. So in Asgard, it looks like magic. In the TVA, it looks like retro sci-fi.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say is probably they are also because they're somewhat out of time in the quantumverse. So my assumption is they are in the quantumverse. They're outside of time and space in the quantum realm. And that is just based on looking at kind of the when they did that big shot of the kind of cityscape.
The city, yeah.
Looking at the kind of, if you look beyond the buildings, the look of the actual background, the actual sky, whatever you want to call it, the horizon, looks like something that when they did Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah. I mean, it almost looks like there is no horizon or skyline.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it's a close-up, yet it's showing this huge cityscape of the TVA. So, I mean, definitely with you there on it potentially being in the quantum realm.
Yeah, I think we even had some feedback on our feedback episode that mentioned that it could be something in the quantum realm as well. One other tiny thing, once again, there are 3 aliens at the center of this plan for the sacred timeline, and everybody we've met in the TVA is human. Apart from Miss Minutes, arguably, because she's not human, she's a cartoon. So yeah, are the humans doing the work for the aliens, or do they just have a branch of the TVA on every single planet, and these TVA agents are only working on Earth? Loads to learn about the TVA. Just want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page of the kind of weird stuff that's going on with them. So, cause
is this V?
More.
Is this the new V?
Exactly.
It might be.
It's when they start to eat hamsters that'll be the problem.
Let's get on to the big showdown in variant number 4. I think, time to get on there. Yeah.
Let's do it. Yes. Let's all head off to Alabama. To Roxcart, which my wife did turn around to me and go, "Is that a real thing?" I'm like, no, it's based on, it's the MCU. It's their version of.
It's a subsidiary of Roxxon.
Walmart.
Most likely.
It is, exactly. It's a subsidiary of, and it actually is in the comic books. Roxcart is in the comic books.
Interesting. Because I do want to know if it is actually connected to Roxxon, because Roxxon was the entity used in every single one of the ABC Marvel TV shows. They were always the villain in all of the shows from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I think even Agent Carter had a mention of Roxxon in there, but all the way up to Runaways, all those, Marvel TV shows have had mentions of Roxxon, and they've gone for Roxcart, in here. So I was wondering, was it a connection, or was it just them kind of going, we can't use Roxxon again, we'll slightly change the name. So good to know this in the comics.
It's the Walmart subsidiary of Roxxon. And surprisingly, good information. Why the reason they went for Roxxon is because Oscorp is usually used as that in the comic books, and they can't use Oscorp because that is owned by the Sony universe aspect of the Marvel universe.
Very good.
So Oscorp is connected to Spider-Man.
Yes. Yeah, like that.
And so they all show up in Alabama, 2050, to this Class 10 apocalyptic event. I do like how nonchalant they were in turning up at a Class 10 apocalyptic event, and I loved how Mobius looked like he had just been bird watching or spotting trains with his like anorak on, and
he was just preparing for the rain.
I know, but it was just like, there's the hurricane type winds, there's the downpour. You see, the wide pan shot with the waves crashing up against, obviously coming into flood, and I thought Mobius really did look like a civil servant arriving at a massive, crisis or tragic kind of, apocalyptic event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved Loki just using his powers to dry himself off.
Yeah.
It was just like prestidigitation. Ta-da! Any of our D&D listeners or players will know that as a joke. It is a spell used by wizards called precipitation.
Very good.
I'm all clean.
Very good.
Anyway.
I love it, and I love that he does have a real reason for it. It's not just about him getting himself dry. It is about the fact that everybody else is going to alert themselves to their presence by their sloppy shoes as they walk around the department store, their wet shoes as they walk around. So he's not going to announce himself as he goes in there. I really love this idea of them walking into this apocalypse and not being able to really disturb it, or not. I suppose, as we've learned earlier on, even if they do disturb it, nothing will be saved effectively. So the members of the team, the Minutemen, how they treat the people that are around them, these really scared people who are hiding out in this massive warehouse. And they're just ignoring them basically because, well, they're going to die anyway. They might as well get used to it. And I love that it's Mobius is going, hang on a second. They're still people at the end of the day. They might be about to die in 20 seconds, but,
the thing, absolutely. But the thing I loved about this was, and because before you knew that it were the guy who was searching for half price, plants, before you realized that he was controlled by the variant Loki, I was there going, that's really odd, but I believe that it could happen. That in the middle of some kind of really massive sort of environmental hazard and weather event, that someone is still thinking about the bargain, I guess.
Absolutely.
And getting in those Roxcart vouchers on the 50%, so that they're doubling their return.
It's a hurricane sale. It's at least 50%
I thought it was really good. And then when it was, it's the variant Loki, has possessed their body, or mind at least, then, I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
I like how uncertain our Loki is, though. When Hunter B-15 asks him, could this be you? And he's like, could be. As in, I could be anybody, basically. I could take control of anybody. Guys, I did live in Carolina in the US, North Carolina for a number of years. And we have hurricane season every year. My family still live out there. Genuinely, you don't really know how strong a hurricane's actually going to be until it lands. And you're told so often that a hurricane is going to be a massive hurricane. So it does wear on you. It's kind of a little bit like the boy cry wolf for a lot of residents of these hurricane zones. So I've seen people who will just sit on their porch and watch a hurricane come to land on the town, drink a few beers and have the day off work. They might, nail up a few boards to make sure their windows don't crash, or smash. But, it's not unheard of that you would be taken by surprise about the severity of a hurricane. So to see this guy shopping for plants in a class 10, hurricane it didn't come as a massive surprise, as you say. So I can kind of see that there would be a bit of confusion from Loki. This might not be me because that's plausible.
It's just fun. Mm-hmm. I just have to say, even when it's at its most complex, this show, I kind of give the head writer and the rest of the writers for this just kind of, they're able to inject that humor into it. In like that, yeah, like this is an apocalyptic event. Here's potentially a guy shopping for kind of plants. And you're like, yeah, that could potentially happen. It's absurd, but it could potentially happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fun overall.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually this whole sequence then of the variant Loki jumping between different people until you get to Randy, it was just really nicely done. I mean, having B-15 being controlled by the variant Loki, then it, you know, because just it made the spiciness of that language between the two just even better, because we know if Hunter B-15 looked back at the tape or some footage of this, she would be probably have the same kind of views as variant Loki, which, you know, holding this other Loki in a bit of disdain, really. I mean, she's really not got an awful lot of time for him, and, you know, she's just letting his sort of ego just wash over her. I mean, she's on a clear mission and she knows what she's wanting to do.
Yeah. And
you can see Loki, it's just the way he's scrambling, the way he's still trying to sort of dominate this variant in terms of, I'm the more superior, you know, I need you as a lieutenant because I'm going to find the timekeepers and overthrow the TVA.
Yeah. Huge appreciation for Wunmi Mosaku here. Her performance as Hunter B-15 controlled by Loki, where she does the Tom Hiddleston's Loki smile back at Loki as he's doing the smile, is fantastic. I would say Wunmi Mosaku on set was practicing that for ages just to get it exactly right. You can tell she's really enjoying playing off Tom Hiddleston there as well. Yeah.
You've got the big butch guy who's, you know, I guess controlled so he can rough up Loki a little bit. And like he was great. Just some of his expressions, his size, everything was really good with that. Just flinging Loki around. So I thought this whole sequence was really good, and just how it, you know, flashing occasionally back to the other members of the TVA team, you know, where they find C20 in the big sort of security room for the supermarket, and you know, we get this is where we understand, at least I thought, that this variant is also has some mission for, you know, to find the timekeepers, as she says she's given away the actual location. And I, you know, this was really nicely done, I thought, and just the different lighting effects as well in, you know, a supermarket where the power keeps getting intermittently cut from the oncoming apocalyptic weather. Like, so good.
What do you think she means by it's real, it's real, it's real, it's real?
I took it as that the threat had been held over, that she was going to do what she does at the end of the episode. The other Loki is going to do what they've been saying to C20, that it's real, it's actually happening. And that's when she reveals that because of this threat, she gave away the actual location of the timekeepers to Loki. So that's what I thought it meant, because she's repeating it over and over again. That's the only thing I could think of, that's she's going, oh no, not only have I given away the timekeepers, she's also about to do the thing, and blow up the timeline effect.
Yeah, it just felt weird to me. It's real. I was wondering if there's more to it than that we'll find out in the next episode. Yeah. Because yes, the threat was very much real, but it's a strange choice of words for that.
No, I thought so too. It was kind of, because it didn't really connect with when she says that she's given away the location of the timekeepers. But it could just, I think as Derek said, it could just be, she says that she's going after the timekeepers. I mean, like any good, evil, Machiavellian type protagonist or antagonist, they always give away their master plan as to how they're going to achieve it. So you could imagine variant Loki sat down on the chair, sort of just laying out the full grand plan of what they're going to do.
But is it even variant Loki? Let's go on to the last point
Yes.
there. The variant reveals themselves. This is the episode. Is it even variant Loki? We know for the first episode that's what they're looking for, and we come up here and we have a female version of Loki with the horns and the full Loki type costume, but the first kind of weird moment of that is when they're having their back and forth battle between, let's say, our Loki and the possessed Randy is, I think, the shop worker who comes to try and help and becomes this Loki. But our Loki calls the other one Loki and is told, no, don't dare call me by that name. Call me by, and they look down at the tag and say, call me by Randy, basically. So is it Loki at all? Or is it someone that's possessed another variant of Loki? Is it somebody else in another variant of Loki's body? Is that's what's going on here? It just struck me as when they instantly say, do not call me Loki, it sounds like it's someone completely different in here still, even though it's been revealed as a Loki.
Yeah, I can see where you're going. It very much could be that. There's precedent for Lady Loki, in the comic books. There's precedence for other Lokis who do not like being called Loki. In the comic books, we've known from pressers and the kind of junkets that they've done that they haven't directly pulled the storyline at all from any, but much like WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, they've taken aspects from multiple different comic book kind of inspiration. So they could very much, like what they did in Falcon and Winter Soldier, take in previous characters, played with them, merged with them, updated them, etc. So it could be a different Loki, or it could be something else entirely. I suppose time will tell.
Absolutely.
And if not, we can go backwards or forwards so that it will tell. But yeah, I know. I think I was very happy with the reveal because it is a fun take, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not just Tom Hiddleston, slightly older or slightly different version of him with his hood down. It's a completely new actor playing the role. And it's very interesting to see how to play. Yeah. And I love that there's a reveal, and we'll probably talk about it in notes a little bit, but I love that there's a reveal of how many different versions of Loki have strayed off the path. We talked about it last week on the first episode that Mobius lied to Loki, our Loki, the first time he spoke to him. He said, you never stray from the path at all. You just go along the path that has been prescribed for you. This episode, he's saying, we've got thousands of Lokis going off the path and we have to cut those branches over and over again. So I love that there's a bit of that in there as well.
Yeah, no, I love the Lady Loki reveal, and the whole showing all the different holograms of the different Lokis, before they go on their, one of their missions. But it's really good. And again, just that interchange between the two of them. I like the idea that she could be potentially possessed in some way or controlled herself. Certainly, I guess they wouldn't show it, but it didn't feel like that. So, I mean, at the moment, I guess I'm thinking it is Lady Loki. But I love this idea of all the different Lokis, what kind of standard deviation are they away from the sacred timeline, how, in terms of how they progress or change, and to what extent. So this was really, really good, for me. I loved the reveal here. And when she sets her plan in action, I just thought that I loved how all the reset devices just lit, and I love that overhead, seeing them all light up, and then disappear to effectively bring chaos to the sacred timeline. And it's an interesting choice where they're all kind of bathed in red lighting then, as that's all kicking off, before the variant leaves through one of the time doors, to escape, after completing what she wanted to do.
Yeah. Followed by Loki really quickly afterwards. And the rest of the TVA don't get there in time. So Loki's now traveled to the same place, effectively, as variant Loki. So they'll be having their showdown, I presume, at the beginning of next episode. They'll be in the same location. But yeah, that master plan being revealed, I think that's such a cool thing, that moment with the reset charges falling through the time doors, because you can see them all starting to be set off. but I just didn't realize they were all also sitting on a pad that was putting them through a time door. So they weren't just stealing reset charges, the variant Loki traveling through time, meeting up with all the TV agents. It was also stealing these ability to create a time door and send it to different parts of the timeline, effectively, to create something that's completely insurmountable for the TVA to deal with. So it kind of cuts back to TVA headquarters as all of their operators are going crazy because you can sort out one or two changes in timeline, but as all of these are created at the same time, will they be able to get them sorted out and back to this sacred timeline?
Yeah. And some of them seem to be approaching the Nexus line quite quickly, actually. So there wasn't much time there.
Well, the charge wipes out everything in its radius.
Yeah.
So you'd presume Variant Loki has chosen the specific location for all of these to go off.
Yeah, must have. And maybe it is to, clear the TVA building. Because I do like as well that I guess Lady Loki doesn't know that Loki Laufeyson is going to be joining her, because she definitely gives him a wave to say later, I'm off. She's not kind of doing the finger wag to pull him in to ask him to join her. So I guess she's going to be a little surprised, when she sees him coming through that time door.
Absolutely.
So you're creating these many fractures. Is it literally just to draw the attention of the whole TVA, get everyone out of the TVA office on the assumption that the timekeepers are in the central tower so that they can get to there?
Well, she knows exactly where they are. We don't.
Yeah, no.
But she knows exactly where they are. So that could be what she's doing. It feels like she's absolutely going to destroy this sacred timeline. So, she is a variant, so she's been pulled from whatever the main timeline is and has escaped somehow. But if the sacred timeline were to exist, she wouldn't, is what it seems like, right? Is that my interpretation correctly? If the sacred timeline exists, she can't exist. And our Loki can't exist. The one that we're following in the show also can't exist. So, so what she's trying to do is either potentially break this sacred timeline for her benefit so she can stay alive, or you're right, maybe she's just pulling the TVA agents, the Minutemen, away from that central building to get at the timekeepers.
Yeah, and it's the same idea we were talking about for Loki, from the first episode, that, he now knows that he's dead in the sacred timeline. And
a little later,
and
10 more years of life.
Yeah, but he also says here, about, I want assurances that I won't be processed and wiped effectively, because yes, they could put him back into the timeline, I guess, from when he escaped, but he knows the inevitability of Thanos and what's going to happen there.
They can't put him back.
No, but that's what I mean. So, that's what we thought from last week, was this is what he would be doing to try and maintain his life. That he will, in effect, do what she's doing, in some way, not in this way as such, but, try and escape TVA, at least to try and remain alive, and to jump through time and space.
Interesting, isn't it? Massive reveal of a plan that right in that last couple of minutes of the episode, so everything gets a bit chaotic as well. So definitely going to find out more about what exactly is going on at the start of next week's episode. Anything else to comment on that final point?
No, just I hate that we have to wait a week.
Yeah, me too.
Why can't I just skip ahead a couple of days and say, yay, it's Wednesday again?
This is my favourite part of doing weekly shows. I love this. I love when there's cliffhangers that we only have to wait 7 days for, because it's all going to be over pretty soon. Only 6 episodes, guys. So all going to be over pretty soon. A couple of notes about the episode. We mentioned it before, just that reveal of the kind of the holograms of some of the previous variants. Just like there's a frost giant Loki, which is the blue one that we see at the start. We see a Tour de France winning Loki, wearing his yellow shirt and carrying his trophy. I presume that's what he's winning, because that's the only one I can think of that gets the yellow jersey, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think so. We have a Hulk Loki, a Hulk variant Loki, one that obviously got hit by radiation and became a Hulk, which I thought was cool. That's something I'd love to see in the TV show, of course. We may be seeing it in the future. We also got a Viking Loki, and that's the one that Mobius is saying, and my favorite, just as he's about to shut down the hologram. So Viking Loki, the traditional version of Loki, of course. There's also a bit of an odd one with round sunglasses, still in his Loki colours, still in his green, but looked really, really similar for me anyway to Ben Kingsley's version of the Mandarin. If you remember Trevor from Iron Man 3. Yeah. I wonder if that was just a little gag thrown in for the people that don't like Trevor from Iron Man 3, that actually it was just a variant of Loki that was in there as Trevor.
Yeah. I took it as a 60s kind of play on Loki. But yeah, it could be that. Marvel is great for trolling their fans.
They are. They love having fun.
Yeah, definitely. Fun. Sorry, not trolling. Trolling is a bad term, but yes. I absolutely just adored these quick shots.
Yeah.
And I hope we get more of them, which is like him just circling through, going, like, in the next point when they're in the office is him going through a few more. And you're going to have, like, Fish Loki or, like, I don't know. Some other comical Garfield Loki, where he became Garfield the cat for a while.
I'm sure there are a lot of references there as well to comic book versions of Loki that have been there in time as well, but was too quick to pick them all, unfortunately. One other one I just wanted to quickly shout out again, because we did see it in our feedback section from Michael Booth, one of our wonderful fellow defenders, who pointed out the TVA logo, if you look at it upside down, spells the word Val, as in potentially Contessa Valentina Allegra de la Fontaine, who we last saw in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Could Val be involved in the TVA? And we kind of laughed going, we didn't see it. TVA upside down. If you type out that word TVA and look at it upside down, it doesn't look anything like Val. Absolutely, in this episode, you see Loki looking at files with the stamp of TVA on them, and they're upside down, and it looks really like Val. Check it out. It's a very visual one, a very visual Easter egg for you, but check it out, particularly in that scene when Loki's sitting down with loads of files all around him. It really does look like Val is typed on there.
This is where the font type matters.
Or the Fontaine type matters, John.
There you go. That is it confirmed. Val is a lizard timekeeper.
She might be.
You never know.
Absolutely.
Or is she?
God, do you imagine?
Or is she? Exactly. But with that, let's get on to our defense. Chris, do you defend episode 2?
Very much so. This, for me, it's a great continuation of what was done, continuing with the explanation of how the time variance, the multiverse, the craziness works. I think they've done enough now that this is going, they're on a roll. They have essentially revealed their master plan to a degree within the second episode, and so I know there has to be way more to it. But I like where they're going. I like what they're doing. I like the storytelling aspects of it, and I'm here for it very much so. I'm interested to see how the pacing continues, because to be fair, there was a small bit of up and down in this episode in a good way. They gave us breaks from the kind of the intellectual narrative dumps with other kind of more comedic elements. I'm interested to see how that pacing continues from a story point over the next 4 episodes. They have proven so far with this cast, with the crew, with the writing style, that so far in the first 2 hours it works. Is that sustainable? So yeah, I very much defend. Derek, do you defend this episode of Loki Variant?
I absolutely defend this episode. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I know we have mentioned it before. We did actually get to see this episode last week, just after we watched the first one. So we're really lucky in the fact that we were able to watch them within a couple of days. And I think that's probably why you're a bit more worried that you have a bit of time to wait, Chris, because you're actually waiting almost 2 weeks between the second episode and the third one. But it was such a blast seeing this episode, because the first one was quite heavy on exposition. Second one, while there is exposition in it, having that moment where effectively this sacred timeline is being exploded by the end of the second episode was really shocking. And the reveal of the variant Loki was really shocking. We thought that those two things could be kept till much later in the season. So what are they going to deliver us for the next 4 episodes? Will it just be Loki versus Loki across time and space? Will that be the way, like, you know, the Doctor Who and the Master, which went on for many, many decades on Doctor Who? So, is that the way they're going to play the show out over the next couple of episodes. It's really interesting and really exciting to set it up this way. So I really like this episode. Great stuff. John, what did you think of Loki episode 2, The Variant?
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'd give it 4.5 salad bars out of 5. The reveal of Lady Loki, fantastic. The fact that you kind of have introduced the idea that maybe it could, that Lady Loki in and of herself could be also controlled in some way. Ooh, nice little bit of intrigue there. I think it was just really, really good. I loved it, and I love so many different sequences in this episode. In the Rocks cart, I loved all the exchanges with Mobius and Loki. I just thought they were really like sort of pitch perfect for me. And the shifts in the various tones here, you know, where it's still exploring the timeline, but it's also, as Chris has said, the different comedic elements being brought in here. So this was all really good. I mean, it's so intriguing. I mean, I guess when you're dealing with the, you know, the infinite amount of variations of time and space, I guess you could go mad, couldn't you, really? And trying to think of which way it could go. So like this to me is just so good. So yeah, 4.5 canteen salad bars out of 5.
Love it. Just call out the set design for this show as well. The special effects for the show. The Vesuvius explosion that's going on looks really realistic and kind of like not in the same league, but kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy one where there's a massive sci-fi special effects extravaganza going on in the background. Here we've got Mount Vesuvius blowing up very far in the distance. So you're not getting, it's not the focal point of the show. It's kind of something that Marvel are able to do with kind of the budget they have and the expertise they have, where they're able to do things like an apocalypse event going on in 2050 as well, which looks really realistic and is probably massively expensive. It only gets about 3 or 4 seconds of screen time. You know, I love how much quality and how much is being shown on screen. The really great design and really great behind the scenes stuff that's going on as well.
Agreed. Very much agreed. But gentlemen, with that note, there's a beer smell in the air. That can only mean one thing. It's time to go down to the pub for a good old-fashioned pub quiz.
It really is. Yes, fellow defenders, fellow quizzers, grab yourself a tankard for some of that ancient Asgardian ale. Indulge in some of those Asgardian treats of fruit and nuts by the bar, and enjoy question 2 of the Defenders Pub Quiz. So, question 2, when was the Kablooey chewing gum sold?
I kind of thought that was going to be the question since you didn't call out the years in
I certainly didn't.
Notes. We have a reference point, but you didn't call out the years that it was sold. So
exactly.
Yeah, very, very specific question. So John, give it one more time.
Yeah, the question for episode 2 is, when was the Kablooey chewing gum sold? In which period of time?
Excellent. So 2 questions given so far. There'll be 4 more questions to go, obviously, for the 6 episodes of Loki. Gather all 6 questions together. Email us to feedback@TV Podcast Industries, and you'll be in with a chance of winning some Loki goodies at the end of our coverage of Loki.
So yeah, good luck, fellow defenders, with the pub quiz. Keep those answers flying in. Guys, I think we're on to feedback. First up is some email feedback. Remember, you can send in all your thoughts, theories, questions, comments, you name it, to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Our first email is from Frederick, who had some thoughts on episode 1. He says, "Hey, good old defenders. 1, I don't think that the hooded mystery man is a Loki variant. I didn't think along the lines of it being a Loki variant at all. And the reveal that it supposedly was made way too nonchalantly. That reveal should have been a gut punch. Ergo, I don't believe this is the real reveal. And if it really was Loki in the hood, why not show us at the end?" Yeah, I think we kind of said the same kind of thing. So for sure. I guess now with episode 2, we're fully aware of, the Loki variant here in Lady Loki. So I guess that explains why they kept the figure hooded in episode 1. Frederick goes on to say, and number 2, I do believe that the TVA wrongly believes that the hooded troublemaker is a Loki variant. Why else would they enlist the help of Loki, of all people, to solve the problem?
Gotcha.
Thanks for your great deliberations, Frederick. Yeah, thanks so much, Frederick. I think on your second point as well, I guess that feeds into what you're saying, Derek, that we discussed for this episode about potentially, yes, it's got the physical form of Loki. It could actually be Lady Loki, but it is not controlled by her own consciousness.
Something like that.
It is someone else, or maybe someone taking that form.
Yeah. But at least the TVA believe it's a Loki variant is the point. That's a really good point, Frederick. Thanks so much for your email. We also got an email in from Jerry. He had some feedback on episode 1 and 2. He says, hey guys, this show is a great think piece on the concept of time itself. First off, the TVA is it in the quantum realm? The question is, how far in the future is it? We will soon learn why Lady Loki exists and why she is so pissed off. I think the next phase of the MCU is the multiversal war. Pym particle technology is the cornerstone of the TVA, so how important is the Ant-Man movie going to be in the future? Tom Hiddleston is killing it on this show. Do you guys think there will be a season 2 of Loki to wrap this storyline 2 or 3 years from now down the line? From Jerry in Niceville. That's an interesting question. There's been rumors of all of the shows. There's been rumors that Loki is the one that did already get a season 2, that they are possibly filming on Loki. But I have heard that those rumors were confused by the fact that there was some finishing being done on Loki season 1. So as we mentioned earlier on, director of the show, Kate Herron, has only just returned from her final edits on episodes 5 and 6 of Loki this season. So it would seem likely that the filming that was being done more recently was the end of this series. So will there be a season 2 of Loki? It's possible. But I think the only way this Loki can stay alive is if he's returned to the timeline exactly where he left off in 2012, to take over from the old Loki. And then we have that Loki. Can we have a variant Loki walking around in the universe? Will it be a completely different story where he gets this, as you say, story gets resolved in 3 or 4 years after the movies have taken their run at the multiversal war? That's really interesting possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. If the Loki goes back, the Loki dies. As a variant, he goes back to the point of time where he left, and he then goes along pretty much the same channel that we've seen the last Loki. So dies in Ragnarok, dies at the hands of Thanos.
Or else they just stick him on the ship in Ragnarok, and
yeah,
he just gets an escape ship and he runs away.
Yeah, but I think as well, to your point about Doctor Who, it could go on forever, dare I say it. But, I didn't know, the Pym particle being a cornerstone of, or the cornerstone technology of the TVA.
I don't think it's been called out in the show that Pym particles. I think Jerry's saying that that's his guess, that the TVA are running on Pym particles, or similar technology anyway, to travel through time. No,
that makes sense. Absolutely. For the travel through time, and size change as well, I guess. Just because, I think it feels like, you've referring it to the Ant-Man movie. I guess the Ant-Man movies, their importance, is bigger than I think sometimes the Ant-Man movies themselves suggest. And I think, this potentially makes them even more sort of keystone to a lot now of these new developments to the MCU. So it's really, I like the Pym particle notion. I wonder if we will get it sort of called out directly in this.
Never forget, if Ant-Man and the Wasp hadn't happened, Ant-Man wouldn't have been where he was.
Exactly.
He wouldn't have been able to come back, and the world wouldn't have been saved from Thanos.
Exactly.
He's the fundamental reason why the world was saved, even though the movie may not be one of the more essential MCU movies.
Yes, and we do know that number 3 is Quantum Mania. It is all about the quantumverse and etc. In terms of your final question about the multiversal war as being kind of the next phase, as I kind of were talking about previously, myself and Derek had an in-depth discussion about this. I am very much on this. I think that is exactly where we are going. The next big setup will be time. We do know Kang the Conqueror's coming in. We know now we have the TVA, we have the multiverse just being described. We have the multiverse of madness. There's a lot of threads there. So I do think we are leading towards the Secret Wars. Or an aspect of that going through in the future, where you bring together multiversal multitudes of heroes and villains, and we see a great multiversal war that is a secret to the world. So Secret Wars.
Secret Wars is coming.
There you go. There you go. Long way of getting right. Thank you so much, Jerry. As always, great to hear from you. Next up, we're head on over to Facebook, where we have some feedback from Heather Wallace. She goes, I admit I struggled to follow what was happening in this episode, but I had my Pfizer jab earlier today, so I'm woolly-headed just now. I'll watch it again when the side effects have worn off. Side note, congrats, Heather. Good to hear. Keep going, and hopefully you're feeling a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're 2/3 vaccinated here in the booth, or 1/3, because 2 of 6 vaccinations. There you go.
Yes.
So we're close. So we're on the path. Delighted for you, Heather.
Yes, congrats. Heather went on to say, I did like Mobius saying sometimes you want to play a different part. It's a great call out to Owen Wilson, taking a very different role.
Interesting.
Hearing Holding Out for a Hero made me laugh. There was a YouTube edit back in the day of Ragnarok bridge fight set to that song that achieved a minor celebrity for a bit. I wonder if that's what inspired the director of this episode. The edit features Loki. Excellent hair flip.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a good one. I remember that one. Heather closed up by saying, I'm really enjoying your commentary, lads. Along with the show, it's the highlight of my week. Thank you so much, Heather. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Heather.
it. Glad we are giving you a highlight each week so far.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. I think the hair flip of Loki is pretty good, actually. Along with his big Cheshire Cat grin, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Holding Out for a Hero, I don't know what it is about this week. The trailer for the new He-Man animated show was cut to it. The one from Kevin Smith. This episode of Loki has it included in it, and I think the new trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy, the video game that's coming out in October, is cut to Holding Out for a Hero as well. So, they're definitely making their money off that song this week.
Yeah, definitely.
Suddenly bought the rights, but this week is getting a lot of use. It's a massive song. I've heard it from when it was released.
I guess it's like Kablooey. They've only got it for a certain time.
They must.
And then they're going to do it. But yeah, thanks so much, Heather. Also, Donald Dennis over on Facebook says, this series seems to be flying along. I thought we'd get to at least the last half of the series before time bombs went off. I also loved the apocalypse loophole as a concept. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely with you there, Donald, about the loophole, and using the apocalypse. What's not to like? Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, putting a lot of the stuff, I guess, that, we had initially thought would come at episode 3 or 4, a bit further into the story that they've got anyway, before, whether even with the variant Loki, let alone this, sort of blanket bombing of time, reset charges. So yeah, I guess it's a bit like Apocalypse Now.
Potentially. Potentially. A time bomb Apocalypse Now over multiple, possibly thousands of years. We don't know.
Yeah, with chaos and madness, secrecy, wars, you name it, it's going to be epic.
I do love the smell of time napalm in the morning. That's the right film, isn't it? There you go.
Very good.
It's a time variant version. That's all I'll say.
I wonder if their radio host says "Good morning TVA" in their best Robin Williams voice.
Maybe.
Maybe they've got a variant of Robin Williams there to do it.
That would be great. Lucky people. Thanks so much for that, Donald. We also have a voicemail in from Brandy.
Hi, it's Brandy Elissa Anderson, and I just wanted to share a theory that I've had since episode 1 and get you guys' input on it. Now, I believe that the timekeepers are set in a distant future and that the sacred timeline, and yes, I did use air quotes on that, is actually just the timeline that leads to them being in power. And they don't want those branches of other timelines which could result in someone who could overthrow them. And that's why they want to keep this one sacred. Now, having that belief, I started to wonder, what if the multiversal war that they're speaking of actually did not happen in our past, but it's the multiverse of madness and everything that's happening in the MCU now, which is their past. So I wanted to know how you guys felt about that. Watching episode 2, I was a little bit afraid that it might completely blow my theory out of the water, but I don't think it does. Let me know. Thank you guys. Glad that we're back for more MCU.
Thanks so much, Brady. Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned on our theories about what's happening there with the multiverse. That sounds similar to what we were talking about last episode on our feedback episode, and went into a little bit more depth on the feedback episode. This idea that that it could possibly not be as far in the future as we think, and that these 3 aliens could be having this sacred timeline for their own gain, effectively. It's keep everything this way, make sure the world, all of the things that are happening in the world stay exactly the same as we want them to happen, and then we'll get to our power place, I suppose, at some point in the future when all of these variants are knocked out. I think that's a really good theory, Brandy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great to get your thoughts through on voicemail, Brandy.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, pretty much agreement, thinking that their sacred timeline allows them to get there. The big multiversal war was their past, our future, or the MCU's future, very much could be what we're coming up to getting. I do also think there's a lot more about the TVA that we yet to know. Mm-hmm. Like, it's going to be... I thought that there's a lot of other films. Like, think the best one, Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. The smoke and mirrors. It's going to be very much that, I think, which is don't look behind the TVA, the curtain of the TVA and the space lizards.
Because even that mention with Mobius, someone that looks like he's been there his entire life and is an older gentleman, he says he's never ever met the timekeepers. That he's never had any interaction with them. So, you could be right there with the Wizard of Oz analogy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brandy. Yeah, definitely into the theory that you mentioned about the multiversal war and the multiverse of madness as well, linking in there. And I to be honest, I hadn't really. I mean, we'd said about the TVA being kind of maybe a bit, shady in the last episode, but I like the theory that you have around the timekeeper's power play. It's ultimately a self-preservation, self-glorification type way of keeping them sort of at the top of the food chain, I guess, in that sense. So yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much, Brandy.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for all your feedback. We love getting your feedback in. Please keep sharing it by email to us at feedback@TV Podcast Industries, or popping over to the group on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. And you can join us there, where we put up spoiler posts for all the shows we cover on each of our podcasts.
So thanks so much, fellow defenders, for joining us. Remember, we'll be back later this week to discuss all things Star Wars The Bad Batch with episode 8. Mm-hmm. And we will be back next week with the 3rd episode of Loki. And as always, any feedback on any of the episodes so far is great to get your thoughts on this great series so far.
2 halfway points we're reaching this week. Episode 8 of The Bad Batch and episode 3 of Loki.
It's timed. It's timed.
Must be. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again next time.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, your listen, and your patronage. Speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks again, fellow defenders. Great to have you on board. As always, it's a pleasure discussing all things Loki with you. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending.
For all time.
Always.
Bye.
Bye.